our next tool that we're going to focus on today for our safety is the table saw, the most dangerous tool in your shop. So this one is a big area of focus for us. Whether or not you decide to let your students use the table saw when you get out teaching, that's totally up to you, but we need to teach you the proper operation of the table saw. So, similar to the bandsaw that you've already looked at, we've got a blade and a blade guard assembly. So our blade guide assembly right here and our guard is crucial for safety, should never be removed during operation. As to be fully operational, and operational means that the guards can lift and drop freely without assistance from you. If I simply raise the left side of the guard here right now, you can see that our blade is right here. We've got two anti-kickback pawls. These will grab the stock as it goes through to prevent it from being kicked back. We've also got right here a riving knife. So the riving knife, as we feed stock through the blade, depending on the grain of the wood will sometimes have a tendency to close up behind the blade. And if the wood closes up behind the blade, it's going to bind and put you at risk of kickback. So the riving knife, the anti-kickback pawls, and the blade guard itself is all there to protect the user at all times. So those are key. When we're setting up the height of our blade for cutting our stock, similar to our bandsaw, we want to be just slightly above the stock. Again, the 1/4 inch is a good guide. We can raise and lower the blade right here. So as you'll see, as I'm raising and lowering, what's happening to the guard? It follows the blade at all times. And again, if once you're raising and lowering the blade, the guard is not operating properly, then obviously you need to stop, have a look at the guard and make sure it's working properly. So we're going to set our blade for 1/4 inch above our stock. And again, we'll move our stock out of the way. Notice our cords over here. This is all done unplugged. Okay, we never make any adjustments to this saw with it plugged in. Okay, so we've talked about our blade, we've talked about our blade guard. Let's talk about our throat plate. The throat plate, again, similar to the bandsaw, it's highlighted in red. That's the danger zone. Your fingers should always be outside the throat plate. So that's there for a reason. It's a visual reminder that we're in danger if our finger's in that area. So we're going to use this saw for 2 operations. We're going to do a rip cut, which means we're going to slide it through lengthways. Our stock will be longer going through the blade. Once we've done that cut, we're also going to do a cross cut, and we'll use our miter gauge to assist in the cross cut. Okay, so the next piece of equipment on our saw that's important is our fence. Okay, this fence is very smooth, slides back and forth very easily. We've got our measurement right here, so we don't have to actually use a measuring tape to take a measurement for our stock. We can trust our measuring on air. So I'm going to set this one right now to 4 inches, and I'm going to lock my fence in place. This handle right here allows you to lock the fence in place. Should be no movement in that fence. What you'll notice on the fence is also a push stick. Okay? The push stick is used when you need to push wood between the blade and the fence in a space that's too small for your hand to fit. Okay? So the pinch point when we're cutting, the pinch point and the danger point is between the blade and the fence. That's where the friction is going to be created, and that's where a piece of wood can get binded and get thrown back. So we're going to make sure that we're not in the path of that piece of wood, and we're going to do a cut. So we've got our fence set up, our power switch is here, everything, our table should be clear of all obstructions. There should be nothing on our table. We're actually going to lock our push stick back in place because it's there for a reason, because it's easy to reach. Your physical position should always be to the left, never directly behind the space between the blade and the fence, because if anything catches and gets kicked back, it's going back here, and you don't want it to physically make contact with you. Your pressure as you're pushing through is a diagonal pressure coming from here and pushing against your fence all the way through. I know it's going to sound odd, but your eyes are not on the blade. Your eyes are on your piece of stock and the stock as it travels against the fence, because it needs to follow that fence snugly all the way through. If it starts to turn, it's going to bind and cause kickback. All right, now we've plugged our saw in, we have power. We're going to get ready to cut our first piece of stock. The first cut we're going to do is a rip cut. So that is cutting our piece of stock lengthways. Normally, if it's a natural piece of wood, the wood grain will run this way on a length, and that's what this saw is primarily designed for, which is ripping material. Okay, we can also cross cut, which we'll demonstrate after, but this first cut is the most important and the most common, which is a rip cut. We're cutting the wood lengthways. We've already set our fence to our 4 inches, which is our cut. Our push stick is handy. Our power switch is right here, and it's very important location for the power switch. It's right on my left thigh. So I'm always operating the saw to the left side of the blade. The kill switch being on my thigh means I can turn the power off and not need my hands. My hands can stay with the piece of stock and never have to let go of anything. I can kill the power, wait for it to stop, and then we can reposition. So we're going to make sure we've got our piece of material ready. Okay, we're going to have that position before we turn our saw on. And once we turn the saw on, you'll see that the blade spins towards me. The teeth are applying pressure down and backwards. So we actually have to give this wood a fair bit of assistance to push it through. The pressure is going to be down and backwards. Okay, so we're positioned. Now that we've finished our demo, we're going to make sure that we've got our safety glasses on. If required, you could also wear hearing protection, but for me, for this brief demonstration, we're just going to use safety glasses. So we're ready to go. So our safety zone behind us, make sure there's no one in your safety zone. No one should be in that area when the saw is being used at all, because the kickback will be back that way. So we're ready. We've got our push stick handy. We've got our material. Let's get our material oriented to where we're going to cut. Again, nowhere close to the blade. We don't want the material touching the blade when we start the saw. We're comfortable. We're to the left. Turn our saw on. We'll let it get up to full speed. It's going to take about a second and a half, and then we'll start to feed the stock. I'm going to feed the stock this way, and when I get part way through, I'm going to take my push stick and I'm going to actually finish the cut, pushing all the way through. The key part to the cut is that I have to push on the inside, which is the pinch point. I have to push that piece all the way past the blade, at least to my anti-kickback pawls. That way it's clear of the blade before I stop. So everybody's ready. Double check our safety zone, safety glasses. We're ready to go. Let's make our rip cut. All right, we've done our rip cut. The next process for this tool is a cross cut. Now, in order to use the cross cut, we utilize our miter gauge, sliding miter gauge, which is conveniently stored in our saw. This miter gauge fits in the track, and I'll just lay this aside. And again, your miter gauge should slide freely in your track. We're going to do a basic 90-degree cut. The miter gauge is adjustable left and right, so if I want to do an angled cross cut, I can. I just set it to the desired angle and I'm going to cross cut. Now, the very important feature here is that we never use our miter gauge in conjunction with our fence. Okay, that's a very unsafe operation. We can set our fence temporarily. If I want to do a cross cut that's 4 inches, I can set my fence to 4 inches. I can position my stock so it rests against my fence onto my miter gauge, but before I make the cut, I have to unlock and slide my fence away. Okay? I cannot use both in conjunction because it's very dangerous to create a pinch point here, and that's going to cause a major kickback, and that can lead to injury. So even though I want a 4-inch cut, I've positioned it. My hand positions on my miter gauge are pretty simple. This is a relatively small and not very heavy piece of stock. I'm going to push with my right hand on the handle, and you'll notice my left hand is locked on, my left thumb is locked onto the miter gauge, and my fingers are applying pressure downward on the piece of stock. Very important here that you don't apply too much downward pressure. The more pressure you apply down, the more friction you're creating between the surface and the stock, and it's going to lead to a very rough, jumpy cut. We want that to be smooth. All we're doing with this hand is balancing and controlling our piece of stock. So again, we've got our position. Notice my body again is still to the left. This piece on the inside of the blade should simply fall free once I finish the cut. It's nothing binding it between the blade. We've moved the fence, so we're going to push through here. Once we see this piece separate, we know we're through. Then again, we can just kill the power with our thigh and wait till the blade to stop to remove the material. So let's get ready to make the cut. Everything's clean. I'm away from the blade. I don't need to adjust my blade because I'm cutting the same piece of material. Let's start her up. Once the blade is completely stopped, I can lift my anti-kickback pawls and remove my piece of material.